welcome to New Stripe City, a podcast for diehard Bengals fans. I'm your host, Ace Boogie. Our co-host G is on with us as well, and welcome to the Bengals 2017 draft recap. Like I said, my name is Ace. We have on G, my co-host. We also have Garrett Staples from Within Ohio Bias, and we have my boy Cleve Anderson as well. So, just starting things off, G, let's get let's get your thoughts on the draft process for the Bengals. What grade would you give the Bengals for this draft?
I think I give them a C plus. I really feel like we missed out on some big time defensive players in that first round pick. Like I just don't. I think John Ross is cool. I think he's an awesome athlete, but I don't think that we should have picked him first. I do like the addition of Joe Mixon, even with the mixed reviews with his off the field issues. I think that, I'm hoping that all that's behind him. I think he's a great addition. But then again, it's just kind of like, so what are we doing with our offensive line? Like we have some explosive offensive players we just added. But who do we add really to the offensive line? Because we lost a few people. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I just wish we would have did more with the defense on that first pick.
Okay. Garrett, what are your thoughts on the overall draft? What grade do you kind of give that draft? And just throw some thoughts out there on your analysis.
I'd go around anywhere from a minus to a B plus. That would be my grade. I figured they were going to go either receiver, linebacker, or defensive end, but then just the way things were kind of shaking out, and then I just think if you go back to last season, and when AJ got injured, and you just saw the drop off and how defenses were playing us, you had no legitimate deep threat. And so you basically had coverage where they were just playing close to the ball because they felt nobody could beat us deep. We had nobody to beat them deep. So I understand why they put the emphasis on the offense. And if you watch some of the draft and just their breakdown as far as our scoring from last year, we were one of the lowest scoring average teams offensively in the league. So that, I mean, it had to be addressed eventually. And I think, if you look at free agency, we haven't been the same since you have Mohamed Sanu go to Atlanta, a Marvin Jones Jr. go to Detroit. So it was going to have to be addressed. And, I think we're not a major market team. So I knew we were going to either do it. It was probably going to come in the draft because it wasn't going to be free agency. So I understand it. Now, personally, if I was Duke Tobin, if I just had to be the GM, like Gina stated, something I would have done is I really would have tried to push trading AJ McCarron to Cleveland and getting another first round pick. And I really wanted Reuben Foster. I really did. I'm still a little hurt about that. I still wanted him there. And then I don't know if you remember going back to the draft class when they were looking for a quarterback to replace Carson. You had Andy and you had Kaepernick, and it was basically a split because you had Jay Gruden as our offensive coordinator at that time frame. He wanted Dalton because he was pro ready, but Mike Brown wanted Kaepernick. So what I'm leading up to is basically if you would have made that trade, AJ McCarron sending him to Cleveland, we still could have brought in a backup for dirt cheap like Kaepernick. And Mike Brown would be happy because he still to this day I feel likes Kaepernick, and he's our organization of all organizations. As much as they beat us up in the media, we'll give a guy a second chance. Even though, I mean, being socially active in the community, I don't know how that can be frowned upon, but NFL owners, they have blackballed him for that, But that's just my feeling. But I think just like we were talking offline as far as the defensive ends, we needed that help. And I really kind of see just with how deep defensively, defensive tackle and defensive end with the way we drafted, I'm looking at some of these guys like a Brandon Thompson or a Pat Sims. These dudes might get cut. Michael Johnson, when you look at cap money and stuff like that, those are cap casualties to me that now that I see the way that they drafted. And it's interesting, like you said, we had a lot of tweeners. or normally we draft basketball type guys at defensive end, 6'5", 6'6" with long reach. But these two guys, like what was it? I'm trying to think of the names.
Jordan Willis and Carl Lawson.
Wilson and Carl Lawson. These are kind of guys that really fit. Like they almost remind me of like Steelers and Ravens linebackers, where they're hybrids. Where they can put a hand in the ground in the dirt, or they can stand up and be from a rush in. So it's interesting how they kind of changed their mantra and their philosophy is drafting ends. But the bottom line is we were really lacking, and the defense really fell off as far as applying pressure and getting to the quarterback. That was something when we went to the playoffs against the Steelers. We were high end. We were top 10 in defense, and we really fell off and took a step backwards this year, and they addressed that. So from that standpoint, I'm happy. And I felt like, in the AFC North, as far as run defense, we needed to improve that. And I feel like with Glasgow and having Billings back and just the rotation that we have at hand with Geno, it's not so much all going to fall on Geno now. Now you have a rotation to give him spells and a breather, and the defensive line doesn't have a major drop-off. So I was impressed. I was happy with the draft for the most part.
Cool. Cleve, what are your thoughts on the draft? What would you give it as far as a grade, and what are your thoughts on it?
I'd give it A+. I don't think we could have had a better draft. I know we could have got a lineman here or there, but I think at the 9 pick, nobody was really there that was worth the 9 pick. And then that second pick, I couldn't pass up on Mixon to go lineman right there. So I think we did pretty good. We could have got that guard out of Utah, Asiata, in like the 4th or 5th round. That's the only thing I would have changed. But other than that, we did a pretty good job.
Cleve, I mean, not Cleve, but Gary, you had a question for Cleve, right?
Yeah, I had a question. Being in the first round and say you were Duke Tobin and Mike Brown and you were the GM, would you have selected with Ross? I'll say this. Would you have selected Ross over Reuben Foster, and who else was available?
Alvin Cook. Oh, you mean defensively?
Alabama defensive end.
Jonathan Allen was out there. There were a lot of guys on the board.
Okay, Howard. Me personally, no. I mean, when I was looking at some of them trades that went on, I think I would have traded back. I grabbed some extra picks. Buffalo got a first round next year. I would have did something like that and traded back and pick Reuben Foster. But that's just me. But I'm not mad that we picked Ross. Ross is a unique talent. You can't find people like Ross out there. And we needed a deep threat, and I think that's probably the best deep threat in the draft.
Well, my opinion is I felt like initially the first night, first of all, it was pretty cool because I went to a draft party around here, and it was for Florida State. And, of course, Peter Warrick was there. I had an idea that he was going to be there. So it was pretty cool to kind of chop it up with P-Dub and everything and get his thoughts on it. And he actually came around when we actually made the pick. So I talked to him a little bit beforehand when the draft started, and then he came over when the pick happened. And initially, the only concern that I really had with Ross was the injury history, right? He's an elite talent, just like Cleve said. He's very explosive. But, looking at it from the standpoint of, okay, if I have a guy that I picked number 9 and he goes out and gets hurt, then you basically just wasted a top 10 pick, something that you haven't had since 2011. But, the more that I kind of let it marinate, and I kind of had to sleep on it for a little bit because I was a little bit shocked. And I thought about how everything planned out. And when you look at how the draft went, I don't think anybody thought that Corey Davis was going number 5. If you compare the two picks, depending on how Corey Davis goes, I feel like that was more of a reach than John Ross at 9 for us. And I think what happened is the way that the draft kind of dictated things with Corey Davis going, and then you turn immediately around after that and Mike Williams goes. Maybe the Bengals felt like had they attempted to trade back that Ross wouldn't have been there, which I understand. And one thing that I like about it is that the Bengals went away from what they typically would do. So I think if it was, the Bengals from previous years, I think they would have possibly wanted Ross, but then they would have moved back to like 14 or 15, and then another team would have jumped up and took Ross, because it seems like anytime they try to trade back, somebody always comes in and swoops in and gets their guy. But the more that I think about it from offensive standpoint, you having to account for not only John Ross, but AJ Green, Tyler Eifert. Man, this offense is pretty loaded. And I mean, he hits a need that we actually kind of need as far as speed. And that deep threat was kind of missing a little bit last year. AJ is a little bit of a deep threat himself, but when teams are double teaming him and taking him away from our offense, it almost, in a sense, kind of stifles our offense. So I think that Ross would definitely open the offense a lot more, but then you can also look at the impact that he could have on special teams. And I think the indication of them using possibly Ross and Mixon on special teams was them taking Josh Malone. I mean, Alex Erickson was a great guy, but if you have John Ross, on your special teams, that's explosive right there. So you upgraded on special teams, you upgraded as a deep threat. And then the other thing that I liked about John Ross, like I told you guys, the only thing I don't, like about him was the injury history. He's more than just a deep threat. He's not like a Mike Wallace where all the guy does is run flies. He can run, slants, and he can also – it's funny because he's a short guy, but he's actually a pretty good red zone weapon too. So I think that will be good. And then someone had mentioned – I think, Cleve, you had mentioned why would we pair Ross with Andy Dalton because he always overthrows people. And then I think I was agreeing with you, and then I came across somebody that said, do you really think that anybody can overthrow John Ross because of how fast he is? And I was like, hey, that's the –
I was saying underthrow.
Underthrow.
That's what I was going to say, too. I was like, I don't think Andy's getting the ball out to him.
Yeah, Andy.
No.
I don't think he's getting it out there.
True.
I think that's my only gripe with Dalton, and I think his arm strength, because like Clee was saying, and another buddy of mine, he does underthrow. Like there's a lot of occasions where AJ will have a step on a DB, and Dalton, AJ's waiting on the ball in the air when he's already got a step, and then that defender has time to recover because he can't get it down the field. So that's something that he went out to California and worked with Tom House out there in Cali,
right?
Tom Brady's quarterback coach. I hope he works on it again as far as his accuracy on his deep ball and just strengthening his arm, because there's been many occasions where AJ, he has to wait on the ball,
right.
And that's the difference in some of them playoff games. Like when we played in Houston, his accuracy on his deep ball is the difference from that touchdown and incompletion. And then just going back to the first round, I kind of feel like John Ross had some durability issues. But if you look at the one thing I will say about Alabama players is that why I kind of like LSU players versus Alabama is that they're playing postseason every year. And if you notice, all of Alabama's players, they are all, each and every one of them, even Reuben Foster, if we would have drafted him, we still would have got killed from a PR relation standpoint because he's had his issues, a few issues off the field, but then also he's had a medical red flag as far as his shoulder.
Right.
And then if you look at Tim Allen or Williams or whatever.
Jonathan Allen. Yeah, he went to the Redskins. The reason they said he slipped so low was because he had both shoulders. Right.
Surgery on both of those. So that's the only thing I have with Alabama products is that they're used so much in the college game. By the time they get to the pros, they're already coming in here with injuries for playing long postseasons, in the college game, because they're normally every other year in the national championship.
I mean, I totally agree with that. Because, especially for Alabama offensive players, like they rarely are effective in the offseason and everything like that. But like my issues with Ross are y'all's like combined. It's like the injury thing for a wide receiver. If he's going to have that breakout speed, like I just feel like that's going to affect his, like injuries are going to affect him more than an injury would affect Reuben Foster. And then also Andy getting the ball to John Ross, like, yeah, he's quick. Yeah, we know he broke records. But again, I don't think Andy has the arm strength to get the ball to him if he's going out that fast and that far. So I just feel like we could have had a receiver later in the draft that could have filled a slot just fine, and we didn't need John Ross. Kind of like Mohamed Sanu. Like, was Mohamed Sanu picked first round? Like, I don't think so, but he was super effective as a wide receiver on our team. So I just think we picked him way too high.
Right. I feel y'all. I feel you. Hopefully the thing that gives me a sliver of hope with Ross is hopefully the staff tries to use him kind of how we used Andrew Hopkins. It seemed like Andy back in the day had some pretty good chemistry with Hopkins. I think that Ross is a little bit faster than him, but if they can use him like underneath, I think in the middle of the field on like a slant or something like that or a dump off, maybe that's a way that we can make sure that Andy is a little bit more accurate with those shorter passes than those longer ones. But yeah, I definitely agree with your concerns, G.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm.
but I feel like one thing that I did like about it too was it made the Bengals kind of step out of their comfort zone, and we kind of talked about it too. And I think that they stepped out of their comfort zone with the edge rushers that they picked. Those were tweener guys that they've rarely picked. Like you guys said, they picked like the 6'5" guys. The fact that they went after something out of the norm made me feel like they're going for it. And I think with John Ross, because of his durability concerns, they weren't really looking at, I think, the long-term picture with him. They were looking at the immediate impact. So
Yes.
to me, that means that, okay, you're trying to do whatever you can right now to stack this offense as much as possible. You look at the Mixon pick. I think it's the same thing. You're talking about a backfield now, and I think just like Jeremy Hill said, it looks like it's the best backfield in the NFL. You're talking about Giovanni Bernard, Joe Mixon, and Jeremy Hill. And the fact that Jeremy Hill has already taken Mixon under his wing from, all of the criticism that he's received, he could have gone about it a completely, totally different way, but he took Mixon directly under his wing. I love that pick. Yes, it was controversial. I was kind of looking at them a little bit sideways because they traded the pick to Minnesota when they could have taken Dalvin Cook. But, the fact that they received another fourth rounder, maybe it was in a sense worth it because I don't feel like there's much of a gap between Cook and Mixon. I think that Cook is better than Mixon, but I don't think that it's really by that much. And you're talking about a guy that's going to be playing in the AFC North. So I guess Mixon would, in a sense, from a size perspective, end up being a little bit more durable in our division. So I was kind of on the fence about that, but I'm cool with it. Third round, Jordan Willis, like we said, with the edge rushers. I love the pick. Dude was, from what I read, dude was supposed to go, I think, anywhere from 19 to 41, and we get dude in the third. Carl Lawson, a dude that was supposed to go in the second round, you get him in the fourth round. He has durability concerns too. He's almost kind of like the John Ross of edge rushers, but he's extremely talented. And just piggybacking back to the first round a little bit, if you think about the alternate options, because I thought that they would go O.J. Howard, I thought that they would go Reuben Foster. It seems like all of the guys that were alternative options all failed. So you look at O.J. Howard. O.J. Howard didn't go until 19, which there were a lot of teams that could have taken him, and I was kind of scratching my head on how he was going to fall that far. I didn't think that he would go all the way in the top 10. I thought that we had a chance of taking him, but I didn't expect him to fall to 19. Jonathan Allen, like you mentioned, Garrett, I wanted us to take him. That's who I was upset with. I was upset about us not taking Jonathan Allen because I'm like, how do you not take a guy who I think was the best defensive player in the draft period, but was basically a consensus top 3 guy, a month ago. But apparently NFL teams have done their research and he fell that far because he does have issues with his shoulders. So, I saw that. And then with Reuben Foster, I was worried about Reuben Foster because of the shoulder. And I think I talked to Cleve, and I think we talked on this last episode, Cleve, and I was just worried that, the Bengals are in a win-now situation. I feel like with Reuben Foster, just given the history of when A.J. McCarron came in, if you guys remember, he had that shoulder injury that kept him out the entire season. I didn't want to see that happen with Reuben Foster, especially coming off a year where we just had William Jackson III and Andrew Billings basically have a redshirt year. We needed somebody after going 6-8-1. I felt like we needed to have somebody that can make an immediate impact right now. Let's see. After that, Josh Malone. I'm not mad at the Josh Malone pick. I think me and G spoke on this earlier on a couple podcasts ago. I felt like wide receiver was our strongest position. I really didn't think that we needed to take a receiver, but apparently, if their goal is getting the best guys that they can from that position out on the field, I can't really be mad at them. Tyler Boyd, I don't know where his role goes. From what I hear, it sounds like they still want to keep Boyd in the slot. And it sounds like Ross is going to be kind of like their gadget receiver where they'll just throw him out there randomly. It seems like LaFell is still going to be there. So I'm looking at Josh Malone, and I'm wondering, how he affects Cody Core and Alex Erickson on that receiving core. But, I mean, I wasn't too mad about that. The offensive lineman pick with Dillman, I think that was a steal. So, to me, overall, the more I think about it, and I know I've been rambling for the longest, but I think that I would have to give them an A for this draft. Now, one of the big concerns was, and I know that all of us, show some issues or concern with the offensive line. What were your views on how the Bengals, with their lack of basically attention to the offensive line during this draft, how do you think that that's going to affect them going into the season? G, we can start with you.
Well, I mean, I'm going to take it back to John Ross. If we want Andy to even – well, first of all, I don't know if he has an arm strength to throw those deep passes, but if you want to give him the chance, you got to give him time. Is he going to have time to get the ball out there to him? I don't know, because, I mean, we lost a major offensive line, not only player, but leader. So, I just think that's something that maybe should have been addressed as well. That's something we could have looked at in those later rounds. I mean, hopefully that might be something we're looking at in the off season after the draft. But you definitely got to make sure you have a top-tier offensive line if you're going to have that stack type of offense, because Andy's got to have time to get the ball out to these receivers. And you got to create spaces for your backs, too, if you want to have this running team back in the backfield, too. So you definitely need to look at some offensive linemen.
Right. Cleve, what are your thoughts on the line?
I think it can't be no worse than it was last year. I know we missed out on winning KZ, but we gave up 41, 42 sacks last year. Worse than that, I think we'd be all right. I think they got more faith in the younger guys than what we have. Because you never know what Westerman going to do. You don't know what he going to do. Play said in his natural position, maybe he can be a little bit better than he was last year. But I think I got a little bit more faith than most people do got in him too.
Garrett, what are your thoughts on the line? I know earlier before we went online, you had some thoughts. So I want you to kind of spill your thoughts on this line, man.
That's my major. I think for us to be successful, I think we really addressed the defensive line and the pass rush. But my major concern is that offensive line and Dalton's protection. Like Gina was mentioning before, my projections, I was thinking, I'm like, so you're looking at maybe like right tackle, Andre Smith, right guard, you're looking at Fisher, which I really like Jake Fisher. Center, I'm hoping it'll be Dillman and not Bodine, because I mean it's really that just scares me to think of Bodine starting at center again. And then left guard, I wasn't happy with Clint Bowling. So if it's Westerman that they inserted at left guard, more power to him. I'm happy about that. And the one that makes me cringe right now after watching the way he had struggled at right tackle. And, normally at right tackle, that's not your what is that? At right tackle, so that's what the left defensive end or whatever that he's going up against. That's the team's second best defensive end. When you play left tackle, you're playing the team's their number one defensive end every game. So that really concerns me as far as Cedric Ogbuehi is concerned. And I'm hoping that, maybe, after coming off an ACL injury, normally they say it's not the first year, but the second year you get full strength of that leg. So I'm hoping he'll have his bend back, his reach, and he'll be ready to play left tackle, because that's a major assignment, blocking the quarterback's blind side.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Honestly, when I thought about Ogbuehi just having a potential to become the left tackle before free agency started, I was scared. I was like, the Bengals need to draft Cam Robinson in the top 10. Since then, I think you made a valid point, Garrett. He had a knee injury. Obviously, we saw what knee injuries can do to guys. You look at Geno Atkins, he didn't even look like himself the next year. You're talking about a guy that's, top 3 defensive tackle in the NFL. Ogbuehi, I really hate the guy. But, I mean, he's who we have there. And apparently they believe that they can fix him. It sucks that we spent, 2 high draft picks on tackles 2 years ago in the draft, and we still don't really know exactly what we have with them. They claim that left tackle is supposed to be his, preferred position. We'll see. I think it's a way harder position to play in the NFL. Most guys who can't, play left tackle in the NFL end up playing right tackle. But I do think from a standpoint of depth, I think that a dark horse is Trey Hopkins. I talked to Garrett about this a little bit earlier. It seems like they like using the guy at left tackle. He's been on the team for about 3 years. He was on a rise, but I think when he was about to make the final roster, he had some sort of injury. I watched him a little bit last year in the preseason. He did very well. He actually started while Jake Fisher was out a couple of preseason games at left tackle and guard. He played pretty well. I think if he can't handle the position, I think he could be a guy that can come in there and at least be solid, right? Just somebody that won't get Andy killed on every single play. When you look at the rest of the positions, like right guard with Westerman, from what I hear, the Bengals want to play Andre Smith at guard. So I think that's going to be interesting. Their plan is to start Andre Smith at right guard. They're going to roll Jake Fisher out at right tackle. They're going to have he play left tackle. And apparently Bowling, I believe, is going to be left guard. And center at the moment is Bodon, but I think that they'll definitely consider replacing him because I think you said, Garrett, last year at one point they benched him. So I think his spot could be up for grabs between possibly Westerman. There's also another cat that we have as well, Alex.
Or what about the guy they brought back from Arkansas? They re-signed him too. TJ, I can't think of his last name.
TJ Johnson played good last year. Yeah. TJ Johnson is another one that played pretty good. I think he did he step in for was it Zeitler last year? It was someone that or Bowling. He stepped in for Bowling. Yeah. He played pretty well. I think he's another guy. So I'm going to hope that the coaching staff can get this together. Apparently, I think Jeff Hobson said something like last year they weren't even really concentrating on the offensive line as far as it being, a point of focus because the year before they were so good. So they said that this year, they said last year it was receiver where they kind of focused on everybody. And they said going into this year it's going to be the offensive line. So let's just hope that they can do better than they did last year, which I don't think is out of the realm of possibility that they can at least give up less than 40 sacks because 40 sacks is crazy. That was ridiculous last year. You have to give Andy enough time, and I think that affected the offense in a lot of ways. You talked about how we were one of the lower scoring offenses, and I think that a lot of it had to do with the fact that on some of those key drives, Andy couldn't make plays because he has 2 guys in his face.
Yeah.
So we have to definitely keep him clean. The thing that gives me a little bit of encouragement, even though they didn't go offensive line in the draft, I kind of understand that because historically, this was one of the weakest offensive lineman drafts. I don't know if you guys caught Dave Lapham, but he was like, and he's a former lineman himself, and he was like, the linemen in this draft class are terrible. But I think the light at the end of the tunnel is guys that are still out there. You talk about Nick Mango. He's still a free agent. You talk about the fact that we still have to go through preseason, and, some of those veteran guys can get cut. So if one of those guys gets cut, maybe the Bengals go out and sign one of them. So I'm not totally satisfied with the line, but I just hope that, we have a Nick Mangold or somebody in store that can come in at the last moment and give us a little bit more stability on that offensive line.
I think they're going to – I also think just tying in with the offensive line as far as you're talking the struggles they may or may not have and just trying to get that young offensive line to gel. I think from a play calling standpoint, when you have an offensive line that you're not so sure about, you're going to start going with a lot more quick passes. And with a guy like John Ross, I look for the screen game, those kinds of wide receiver screens, all those kind of more like spread offense, college offense plays. I look for them to run those kind of plays to just get the ball in your playmaker quickly. Like if you watch New England's offense, they don't really relatively throw deep. It may be 5-10 yards and have the receiver run after the catch. And when you have a guy like Ross, you have a guy like Boyd, and you have some of the struggles up front with the offensive line, I look at a 1-step drop, 2-step drop. I might even think that they might run a little bit more shotgun where you have Dalton sitting in the shotgun where he can already survey the defense, and as soon as he gets it, you pretty much getting rid of it within a 2 to 3 second time frame to kind of counter that struggle with the offensive line.
I agree with that too, but I also see them throwing Mixon in there too and trying to use Mixon kind of like a Le'Veon Bell, like we were talking about a few weeks ago, because I think that he could be not just your running back down the field, but also your quick pass too, and also use him in the slot as well. I think I agree very much so that that's what they're going to be looking for, those quick, fast, short passes, get them out and keep the chains moving.
I agree. I totally agree with you guys. G, you brought up Mixon. Everybody knows that this is a controversial topic. What do you guys think? I guess about the Bengals taking Mixon. Obviously, we all know about the incident that happened. WCPO, I believe in is actually boycotting. I believe. Oh, my bad. I think it might be you. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. But yeah, WCPO is. I think it's still kicking. Feedback, please. Okay, you good? All right.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I was saying, Joe Mixon, it was a controversial pick. From what I heard, WCPO is already boycotting against him. I kind of, I hate to bring outside stuff into sports, but I don't know, man. It's definitely a dicey situation. It's pretty tough. It's pretty touchy. I can see both sides of it, but it's just like when you had a video out there and, you have a team with our reputation, it's hard to take a guy like that. But it's like you're conflicted because he's also, like G said, a key integral part to this offense that he can be. What are some of you guys' thoughts on the Mixon pick? And, do you think that we should overlook what happened? Do you think that we're going to have any issues with it? Obviously, major outlets have been blasting us since we picked him. But just kind of give some of your perspective on Mixon. G, let's start with you.
I think it's very hard, especially me being a woman in this sort of situation, because where I totally feel like, nah, he should not have been invited to the combine. Like, he shouldn't even have the opportunity to play in the NFL for what he did and what everybody across the country saw because of the video. But at the same time, I think about people like Michael Vick, who they got a second chance, and this man has never looked back, and you've never heard any bad thing about him ever since. And I do believe in second chances very, very much. And so looking at it, I think of him as a young man who made a mistake, a very bad mistake that unfortunately we all had to see unfold. But I do think that he deserves a second chance. Like, let's see what he can do. And I mean, he should definitely be on a very short leash. And it's like, next time if you ever hear his name again off the field, like, that's a wrap. But give the man a second chance. He deserves a shine. Let's see what he can do. Let's see what he can prove. Like, that could be a whole different person now. He was young and, he had time to grow up. But with that said, I also still hate being that team that's taking those players that have those off the field issues, because we have to deal with that every year. It seems like, oh yeah, it's another Cincinnati Bengal player. But again, let's give him a second chance to see what he can do.
Garrett, what are your thoughts on the whole Mixon thing?
It's tough, man. I think from a public relations standpoint, and just the way that playoff game ended, and I was watching NFL Network, and I just saw how Terrell Davis, he crucified us basically for this pick, and I understand that. My only question is I could see, and Terrell Davis, he basically said is any other franchise I'd be okay with it. He just feels that Marvin Lewis doesn't hold his players accountable. And, I like the father figure role that Marvin plays with his players, but you still got to instill that fear in the guys, and I like last season, I really thought maybe Marvin, his message had got old with the team.
I think they missed that Zimmer.
With just being here that long, right? Correct. So I'm hoping these guys, and I think you can really see it just with Marvin not getting an extension, that these guys, like you said, I saw one of your posts, Ahmad, where they drafted to win now because they don't know if they have it tomorrow. And you know, you really can't expect that with having gone 14 years and not winning a playoff game. And that's how they really drafted was right now. I think in that position in round 2, I like a lot of them Oklahoma backs. And if they wouldn't have taken Mixon, they could have went P. Ryan and not had to deal with all of the other public relations that comes with Mixon. You know, he's more of a physical bowling ball, kind of like a 2.0 of Rudy Johnson to me, but that was an option. But I think if you're looking at how the NFL is now and what you expect out of a running back, P. Ryan was more of a old school back versus Mixon. He had the all around game. So I'm all about second chances. I think all of us that, you know, I understand from a female's perspective. I respect that. I think as all men, I think we've all had some skeletons in the closet. We might have done something that, you know, may not been right, but I do feel like if a kid has worked all his life, you know, to have this opportunity, I feel like they deserve that second chance. And just like Gina stated, now if you stupid enough to go ahead and mess up after this, and you know you're under the microscope, you know that folks are just waiting on for you to see a second trait of that coming out or whatever, then you got to let them go or whatever. Because you see the effects it had on Ray Rice, because I was living in Baltimore when that was going down and how they did Ray Rice out there. But I also say, you know, you look at that Josh Brown, and I think, you know, I hate to bring race into it or whatever, but you look at the kicker Josh Brown out there with the Giants. They kind of just swept that under the rug, and that was it.
Nothing about that.
And you say with a brother, you know, he made that mistake. I don't want to make it a race thing, but you know, that's something that you take a look at. But other than that, I respect the pick. I like the pick, but you know, they need to do everything from a public relations standpoint, like they're doing. Have him working out in the community, doing different things, you know, to clean up his act. And hell, like I said, I've lived in Baltimore. Hell, you look at Ray Lewis. That year, right before they won the Super Bowl, their first Super Bowl, he was indicted he was on trial for a murder charge, and he beat it. And he went from, in Baltimore, he used to be at all the nightclubs and all that kind of stuff or whatever, to it was straight working out, became about his family. He got involved more with the church on the spiritual side, and you never heard his name again. And I'm hoping that's the same thing that will happen with Joe Mixon here in Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
Cleve, what are your thoughts on Mixon?
I think people are in the outrage because of the video. If it weren't a visual to it, it would still be bad, but it wouldn't be as bad. You wouldn't have so many people talking about it. Y'all mentioned Ray Rice. Well, Ray Rice situation, because you could actually see it. Josh Brown, Tyreek Hill, he's celebrated now, but he's pretty much in the same boat, domestic violence. And you really never hear about that too often because you don't have the video to actually see him hitting like Ray Rice and Joe Mixon. But I think we should give him a second chance. I don't think we should give him a third and fourth chance, like y'all said. But everybody deserves a second chance. He was still young. I know I did stupid stuff when I was young, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. But yeah, I'll be all right with him.
Right. I think the biggest X factor in this entire situation is the age factor. From what I understand, he was about 17 at the time. Correct.
18.
This is the thing. I don't condone anything that he did, but you have to think about his age. Like you guys said, we've all, and I hate it because, you know, as fans, everyone's quick to jump on their soapbox and, you know, criticize these guys for decisions that they've made. Like they haven't made stupid decisions when they were 17 and 16. I mean, you can't even really compare the mindset. I can't even compare the mindset that I have now to what I was doing at 17. I was on something completely, totally different. Age is a factor, but the one thing that I didn't like, and I hope that, you know, Marvin Lewis and them kind of get this under control, is, you know, how he kind of carried himself after the incident. So you know how, from what I heard, apparently, initially when it happened or whatever, immediately afterward, he said that he didn't regret the situation. That could have been him just being a young-minded individual. The thing after that was he also had an incident with, a parking attendant. So it seems to me like he has somewhat of an anger issue, and I think that the Bengals have to try to at least get that under control, because you guys know how our fans are. Look at how guys are talking about Jeremy Hill right now. Look at how guys used to talk to Jermaine Gresham and stuff like that. What if the wrong person says something to this guy and it sets him off? The Bengals need to be like real sensitive with this situation. And then, like you guys said, from a media standpoint, honestly, before the Pac-Man Jones kind of thing, and I mean Devontae Burfict, it wasn't an off the field thing; it was on the field. But when you look at the Bengals from 2005 until now, they've definitely turned over a new leaf as far as guys not being in trouble all the time. But in the media, it kind of seems like we still have the same stuff going on, like when we had Odell Thurman and some of those other guys, the Chris Henry, DUIs, guys getting drunk on the boat. It's not like that anymore. But to ESPN and some of these other media outlets, we still get that stigma type. And I mean, anytime it happens, it just seems like I don't know, everything comes up. But it's just funny to me, like you mentioned the whole Ray Lewis thing. I'm over here looking at on Facebook, and I see like guys putting up memes where it's like a bunch of guys, and you guys may have come across this, but it's like a bunch of guys in a prison in jumpsuits talking about the Bengals training camp. And these are like Ravens and Steelers fans. And I'm like, are you serious? Are you serious? Like giving guys like Ben Roethlisberger, giving guys like Martavis Bryant, giving guys like Ray Lewis, guys who have had a lot of serious implications themselves. What are you? Come on, man. I mean, everyone likes to talk about the New England Patriots. I respect them and everything, but Aaron Hernandez, like, are we serious? Come on, man. Like, I just don't feel like the media goes as hard on the other teams when they have situations like that. Caleb Brantley was taken by the Cleveland Browns. We didn't even hear anything about it. I mean, this guy just had a domestic violence issue. Dede Westbrook had a domestic violence issue. He was taken by the Jaguars. But what is everyone talking about? Everyone's talking about the Bengals, because we had stuff that players did back in 2004 that was wild, but apparently we only get talked about it. You had the Dallas Cowboys, who is basically the media darling. They took Randy Gregory, who's on his seventh failed drug test. And then you also had who was the defensive end that they took? The guy with the guns and all of that. He threw the chick on a bed of guns. He came from the Carolina Panthers. They signed him for like 1 year. Greg Hardy, who did a whole bunch of crazy stuff, but only got off because the chick ended up running away because she was scared for her life. They signed that guy, and we didn't hear anything about it like that. But the Cincinnati Bengals take one of these guys, and you're hearing about it for the next decade. So I mean, hopefully they have him on a tight leash. Hopefully, I think Marvin is ready, I guess, from a media perspective, because they're going to talk about us anyway. They talked about us with Pac-Man. They took Mixon, so I mean, they're going to have to deal with it. But I think, like you said, Mixon has to turn over a new leaf. He has to make sure that he keeps his temper in check. He has to make sure that he's giving back to the community and going out and doing his thing. And it has to be genuine. It can't be that you're just doing this just to, preserve face. Because like with Ray Rice, that incident was crazy. But I honestly feel like a lot of the stuff that he's doing, like all of this advocating and all of that, I don't feel like it's genuine. That's just my opinion. I think that he's just doing it because he doesn't have a job right now. That's just my personal opinion. But, it has to be genuine from that standpoint. And there has to be a sense of the Bengals also taking this serious as well, because you can't just brush off domestic violence like that, in my opinion.
Yeah, and then you had the media that was also murdering us, because you have, from a standpoint on the outside looking in, if you're not a Bengals fan, they're talking about Burfict, Adam Jones, and now Mixon all in the same locker room. And you gotta have that leadership. You gotta have those, I should say, that veteran leadership, to kind of take Mixon up under their wings or whatever, and make sure they stay on the straight and narrow or whatever. And I think that's why they were killing us so much. As far as, do you have those kind of cornerstone locker room guys, to set the right example? So that's the only thing.
Right, I totally agree, man. I mean, we'll see. I think that this locker room is pretty strong. I think that they have a lot of guys who support each other. I think that we have some of those core guys in place now. Now, you had mentioned Michael Johnson earlier. I think that's what keeps Michael Johnson on the team. It's not his actual play. It's not what he does on the field. I think it's what he does off of the field. I think it's what he does and he brings to that locker room. We're trying to take guys like that under his wing and trying to show them how to do things the right way and conduct themselves the right way. So, hopefully we can get that together. But, like I said, I'm not against Mixon. He definitely deserves a second chance. It's just that we kind of have to be delicate with the situation going forward, as far as, like you said, Marvin Lewis tightening that leash a little bit, not, just letting guys do whatever they really want to do, and he's not invoking any kind of fear in them at all. But overall, I kind of feel like the Bengals had to do what they had to do, man, because it's like you either take Cook or you take him. And Cook, although I feel like Cook would come with a little less baggage, I don't know. Mixon doesn't. If he's surrounded by the right people in Cincinnati, I don't think that he has potential to end up in another situation like that. With Cook, you don't know, because, I mean, clearly those outside influences of his friends, and I'm more so familiar with that too, just from being down here in Florida. I think that that's what kind of caused them to not go ahead with him, and I think that's why you also saw him go to Minnesota. I don't think that that's by mistake. A buddy of mine that I talked to about Cook was saying that, they basically got him as far away from Miami as they could. And they got him up there with some guys from Miami and a Teddy Bridgewater and a Xavier Rhodes, who also went to Florida State, that can kind of be there to kind of keep eyes on him. And so I think the fact that he's going up there, they're taking him out of a situation where anything can happen and everything is about football. But you guys still have to wonder about the offseason. So
let me ask you, why did he? And I looked at, from a talent wise, he was another guy that had everything in place. Cook, why did he slide so much the way he did?
I'm not exactly sure. From my perspective, they claim that it's the off the field issues. From just being down here, I feel like the offseason, or not the offseason, but the off-field issues were kind of overblown. He had the incident with it almost was similar to a kind of domestic violence incident from what it was claimed to be. But from being around here locally, it was really much ado about nothing. The people who sat on the jury made their decision in 25 minutes. There were, people who were brought up as witnesses that like directly went against what, the witness basically said that took place. So I think his situation it's almost similar to the Bengals. And the reason I say that is because Florida State, since the Jameis Winston situation, the ESPN has just basically had it out for those guys. And I sat here in Tallahassee knowing the whole thing of what happened with Jameis Winston, knowing that if people just did a little bit of research, they would know that the guy didn't do anything. He wasn't charged. But they just blew everything up on that guy. They blew every single thing up about it. I mean, the crab legs incident. These guys here, they are Seminole heads. That was a fan hooking him up. But all of a sudden, it's Jameis Winston steals crab legs from Publix. I've seen Jameis Winston down here. This dude had one of the nicest watches I've ever seen. Dude drove a Cadillac when he was in college. He doesn't need case point clear. He doesn't need to steal crab legs. Okay. But I think that situation combined with, that whole, because that's a sensitive subject, but that spills over, I think, onto some of their other prospects. The only other reason that I could see him falling is, his influences off the field, some of the people that surround him. Now, I will say that some of the guys, but he comes from that bad of an area, so you can't tell a guy not to be friends with some of his childhood friends, but they come from an area where it's a very tough area. You talk about an area where there's a lot of crime. So I think that teams were more worried about, almost kind of like that Ray Lewis situation where it's the people around you that kind of get you into, testy situations. I think that could be an issue. Possibly the shoulder. The only thing, and that's weird to me because Dalvin Cook is the only guy that I've ever seen pull a hamstring and play in the next game. Like, I've never seen anybody do that. they had a GPS tracking system on this guy to monitor how fast he was going after he pulled the hamstring, and he still played after that. But apparently they were worried about his durability concerns also with his shoulder. I've never really seen him have issues like that, and he has been injured, but I've always seen him bounce back. Those are like the only things that I can think that people would pass on him for. But I think in 2 to 3 years, people are going to regret the fact that they passed on him because, in my opinion, and it's not just because I live down here, I think that he's the best running back in this draft. So, I mean, hopefully, I hope that I'm wrong and Mixon is better than him. But I just would hate for it to be a situation where it's like not saying that Mixon is anywhere in the realm of Chris Perry. I think he's way better. But I just hope that it's not another Steven Jackson, Chris Perry situation where you could have taken a guy, you traded the pick to another team, the other team picks the guy, and then the other guy goes on to be a legend. And you're talking about a guy in Zim who's a defensive stalwart, and he jumped at the opportunity to take Cook. They didn't even really need a running back. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, they did. Well, yeah, they did as far as running back with the Vikings.
You don't think Latavius Murray was a decent option?
He's still coming off of injury, and I think money wise, especially at running back, if you can get a guy who's younger and cheaper, and you think has better talent, you always go that route.
True. I was actually kind of surprised that they took Cook. A lot of people down here were surprised that they took him too. I thought they were trading up, for someone else. I really thought that he was gonna end up going to Philly, but I think the Vikings just needed to leapfrog Philly to make sure that they got him. But man, when I tell you that dude, I'm not even gonna say anything. I'm just gonna let you guys watch this dude in preseason and coming up this next season. Dude is nasty with me. So I mean, maybe it was the character concerns, maybe it was the injuries that pushed him down to the second round. But if you were to ask me who's going to be a better player between him and McCaffrey, no, it's not even close to me. It's not even close to me.
Well,
I honestly think that he could be better than Fournette. I think him and Mixon can end up being some of the best guys from this draft.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I think McCaffrey, he went in a good situation as far as the creativity in that offense where he's going to be playing at. He's not going.
That is true.
He's a different type of back. You're talking about a guy who can be flexed out in the slot. He a gadget player. You're going to be seeing him in a lot of different utilized a lot of different ways than just a traditional back, a power back going up the middle. And I think I'm happy with our draft pick as far as if he can just keep his nose clean and you don't have any other issues. I think from a football standpoint, he's one of the most talented guys in the draft as well. I think his hands, some of the highlight films I saw on Mixon, I think his hands are better than pretty much anybody in this draft from a running back standpoint, other than maybe McCaffrey. So that's just my take on the backs.
It's a little bit of feedback coming in.
You talking about Cook?
No, he's talking about McCaffrey.
Oh, yeah, but I think Curtis Samuels there hurts his value a little bit.
I agree. I think like I said that McCaffrey is perfect fit for their offense. But I think it's a little bit of feedback coming through, Cleveland. I think it might be the volume.
Yeah, it might be.
But what I was gonna say is, who do you guys in your sense think that the Bengals took that could be a potential starter or kick somebody off of the roster? Cleve, we'll start with you. Who do you guys in your sense think that be a potential starter or kick somebody off of the roster? Okay, we'll come back to Cleve. Garrett, who do you think is going to be an instant impact or a possible starter on the team? Instant impact or a possible starter.
You said an instant starter?
Yeah, I think like somebody who can either play like a role or somebody that could come in immediately.
I think that Dillman draft pick, I think he could be the potential starter at center. One thing we didn't mention that I'm still having concern about is that free safety. I'm not sold on Sean Williams. That was one area I would have liked to address. And this kid Malone, he kind of reminds me of a Marvin Jones Jr. Maybe a little bit stronger, a little bit more stronger core, bigger guy. And I think he's going to have an impact on next season as well. But I really like our receiving core.
So you say that you like the receivers?
Yes.
Gotcha. I think somebody that could possibly end up, coming in and making an impact, I think, like you guys said, or threatening, certain roster spots would be Ryan Glasgow. I think you mentioned earlier he's potentially going to, possibly take a Marcus Hardison or, a Brandon Thompson or someone's spot. I also think Malone, like you said, I think that he's a real viable threat. I think John Ross in some capacity could definitely be in a starting rotation. I think you look at the two defensive ends, edge rushers, I think that they could use Lawson definitely at the Sam linebacker. I also think that Willis could, definitely be in a rotation with Michael Johnson on that defensive end spot. And obviously the kicker, how could we forget that? We took a kicker. He's definitely, I feel like, going to be a starter. Some people were upset that we picked him over Zane Gonzalez. I have no problem with it. He's a good kicker anyway, either way you look at it. So I think that he could be a starter. And Dillman, I feel like he's a role player. I don't think that he's going to see the field much the first year unless, like you said, he does have a camp where he's able to unseat Bodine. I don't think that that's hard to do, but they didn't even give Westerman the opportunity to do that last year. So hopefully they try to do it this year. But those are the guys that I kind of see having an impact. Clay, who do you think is going to have an impact? Hold on 1 second. I think, let's see.
I think Clay muted himself. I think it looks like.
Yeah, you have to press the unmute button, Clay. All right. We can't hear you, Clay. I think Clay's gonna try to figure out that situation. But all in all, man, I think it was a great draft for us. I'm looking forward to it. Can't wait until training camp starts. And I think that we have guys that can potentially be a scary team next year. Scary team that could definitely push. I think for being one of the top teams next year. I think we definitely have made a playoff push with the type of draft that we had. And, I look forward to next season, man. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and close out, the draft recap. Thank you guys for coming on. I look forward to working with Western Ohio Bias in the future. If you guys have any kind of, draft nuggets that you guys want to share, if you guys want me on, I'll definitely hop on there. We can, wrap on there. But Larry Black was scheduled to be on for us today, but he's actually witnessing the birth of his first child. So congratulations to Larry. And Larry's going to get with us within the next couple of weeks. We're going to try to get something down. I'm just myself coming off of that whole newborn child schedule, so we'll have to work some things out. I can definitely relate to that. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching, and I'll leave you guys with a who day, all day, every day, and especially on Sunday.